The ocean breeze used to calm me. Not today. I stood outside the lawyer's office, my fingers trembling as I reached for the doorknob. I could already hear their voices inside, low and calculated, like they were splitting up leftovers after a funeral. My name wasn't even on the list. When I stepped in, my son, Derek, didn't bother looking up. Lana sat beside him with that smug look she wore like perfume. And at the head of the table, Mr. Keener shuffled some papers, his tone dry like toast left out too long. Let me tell you this. If you're a mother who sacrificed everything for your child, only to be cast aside like a dried-up sponge, stay with me. This isn't just my story. This could be your warning. Derek finally glanced at me. He leaned back, crossed his arms, and grinned. The whole thing's done, Mum. The Sunset House is under my name now. Same with the accounts. 33 million, all mine. You're not listed on anything anymore. You don't need to worry about all that. I didn't respond right away. My legs froze, like my bones were rejecting the truth. 33 million. My house, my late husband's savings, my retirement, everything I'd built with scraped-together coupons and overtime shifts. Gone. Just like that. Lana spoke up, her tone dripping with artificial sympathy. It's just easier this way, Irene. We'll take care of everything. You can focus on your health and rest. She said rest, like I was being put down. Mr. Keener slid a thick folder across the table. Everything was signed and witnessed properly. Your fingerprint is right there on the updated transfer form, dated 2 months ago. You were recovering from surgery, I believe. I leaned closer. My own fingerprint stared back at me. It was there, plain as day. But I had no memory of signing anything. That's when I felt it. That flicker. Not fear. Not yet. It was something colder. Betrayal. 2 months ago, I was blindfolded after my eye surgery. I was groggy, barely able to sit upright. Lana had been the one who insisted on handling everything, from my food to my paperwork. I remembered her holding my hand, pressing it onto some form, whispering it was just a hospital release. The folder sat there like a silent coffin. I turned to Derek. You did this behind my back, while I was recovering, while I was drugged. He shrugged. You've had your time, Mum. You were never around when I needed you. Dad died, and all you did was hover over Claire like she was the golden child. You left me to figure everything out. Now I'm figuring it out. That name, Claire, my daughter, my baby girl who passed away at 17, a name that still stopped my heart when spoken out loud. He used it like a weapon. The air in the room tightened. I couldn't speak. I couldn't cry. The tears refused to show. My fingers curled around my purse strap as if I could squeeze sense back into this. Keener started listing legal details, but I stopped listening. I stared at the paper, the one with my fingerprint, a signature not made by choice, but by manipulation. Then Lana delivered the final slice. You don't need to be involved in the finances anymore. It's too complicated. Let Derek handle it. We'll let you know if we need anything. That was the moment, right there, when everything inside me flipped. I nodded slowly, took the folder, packed it into my purse without a word. I see. My voice was calm. It even surprised me. I walked out of that room with my spine straighter than it had been in years. That day, I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I didn't plead for explanations or fairness. But something in me changed forever. My son had carved out my existence with a smile. He thought I'd disappear quietly. He thought I'd accept my place as the old woman with no fight left. He was wrong. Dead wrong. Let him gloat. Let them think they'd won. The game hadn't even started. And believe me, when I fight back, I do it in daylight, with witnesses, and no mercy. They should have known. You don't corner a mother and expect her to stay quiet. You make her silent, you make her smart. And once she's smart, she starts keeping receipts. I didn't cry in the car. I didn't scream. I drove back to Sunset House with both hands steady on the wheel, though my stomach twisted like the waves crashing behind my windows. The street was quiet. The sky that used to feel endless now hung low and grey. I parked the car and sat in silence. The house stood there like it always had, but now it didn't belong to me. Not legally, not anymore. The place where I buried memories, birthdays, the smell of my husband's aftershave, Claire's laughter in the hallway. It had been taken from me by the very person I raised. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. A faint trace of lemon cleaner still clung to the air. I had mopped those floors myself 2 days ago, out of habit, for a home I no longer owned. I left the folder on the counter. That was when I saw it. The frame, the only photo I kept on the mantel. My husband, Robert, with one hand on Derek's shoulder, the other holding Claire's little fingers. I wasn't in the picture. I was the one behind the camera. I picked it up and sat on the edge of the couch. The silence grew louder. I saw it now. All of it. Clearer than I ever had. Derek had always been distant, ever since Robert died. He was 20 at the time. Angry. Aimless. I tried. I tried in every way I knew. But Claire had been sick. My world revolved around hospitals, appointments, medications. Derek became background noise, quiet and angry. I thought he would understand. He never did. I ran my thumb along the photo frame. He was hurting, and I didn't see it. I was too wrapped up in survival to notice what I'd let go of. But nothing, not pain, not neglect, not even a mother's mistakes, justifies what he did to me. I turned to the hallway. I still remembered which floorboard creaked when Claire would sneak to the kitchen late at night. That board still creaked. Just like time didn't forget me. I stood up. The hurt in my chest hadn't faded, but it had sharpened, and now it pointed somewhere. I walked into the guest room, the one Derek and Lana stayed in when they visited, pretending everything was fine. The closet door was ajar. On the top shelf, an old cardboard box held the scrapbooks Claire and I used to make. I pulled it down, and that's when I found it. An envelope, postmarked 10 years ago. Derek's name scribbled in Claire's handwriting. It had never been opened. I sat down and opened it slowly. Inside was a letter. Her words were shaky but clear. Derek, I know Mum isn't perfect. I know she misses a lot. But I want you to know she tries. She really does. When I'm not here anymore, please don't hate her for the things she couldn't give. I think she loves you more than you believe. I blinked, reading it again, then again. My hands clenched the paper like it might vanish if I loosened my grip. So he had this. He had this letter. And still, he chose to look me in the eye and gut me in a room full of witnesses. I stood up. I walked to the kitchen. The folder from Kina was still on the counter. I opened it, page by page. Right there, near the back, a transfer of ownership dated exactly 8 weeks ago. My fingerprint stamped under it. No signature, no date filled by hand, just the print. I remembered that day, the surgery, the dizziness, Lana guiding me to the bathroom, then saying I needed to sign some release forms for insurance. My vision had been nothing but fog. I hadn't known what I was touching. Now I knew. They planned it, they timed it, and they used my trust like a crowbar to crack open everything I'd built. I turned on the lamp. The light felt colder than usual. I grabbed my old notebook from the drawer and began writing. Every transaction I remembered. Every time Lana mentioned repairs. Every doctor's appointment she offered to drive me to. I circled the surgery date. Then I opened my laptop. I logged into the bank. The joint account balance was low. Not empty, but far lower than it should have been. The detailed transaction history showed repeated transfers labeled maintenance, improvement, upgrade. One company name stood out. LJW Holdings. I Googled it. Lana Jane Whitlow. She'd formed her own LLC, and she'd funneled the money straight through it, claiming it was for the house. I scrolled faster. One deposit matched the week she said the roof was being replaced, but I had never seen a single roofer on the property. That was it. That was enough. My breath was shallow, my pulse hammered. They'd turned me into a signature, a name to erase, a problem to manage. But I wasn't going to disappear. I grabbed the phone, not to call them, not yet. I called the clinic. The receptionist answered. I need to speak with the nurse who assisted during my surgery 2 months ago, the one who handled the discharge process. I believe her name was Emily. There was a pause. Then she replied, Yes, she's here. Would you like me to transfer you? Yes, please do. A soft click. Then a new voice. Hello, this is Emily. Hi, Emily, this is Irene Whitlow. I need your help. Something happened the day of my surgery. I think you saw it. I could hear the tension in her silence. I think I remember. Good. Then I need a copy of anything you recorded. I need your statement. Because I believe I was manipulated that day, and I'm ready to prove it. Emily's voice was careful. Let me talk to my supervisor. I'll call you back in an hour. That was enough for now. I hung up the phone. I looked around my kitchen, my home. The walls weren't closing in. They were about to open wide. Because if Derek thought he could strip me of my name, my history, my place in this world, and walk away clean, he was about to learn the one thing I'd kept quiet for too long. A mother's silence is not surrender. It's the sound before the storm. The next morning, I was wide awake before the sky turned blue. I sat at the edge of the bed, listening. Nothing. Just the soft ticking of the old wall clock and the ache in my chest that had sharpened into something colder than grief, the kind of cold that stops being afraid. I dressed quickly. I didn't bother with breakfast. I needed answers, and I was done waiting for them to come to me. At 8:07, my phone rang. Emily. Her voice was quiet but steady. She said she had checked with her supervisor and could confirm that there was video from the discharge room. She wasn't supposed to let patients see it directly, but I could request a written statement about what happened if I filed an official concern with the clinic. She remembered Lana clearly. She remembered her leading me into the room, placing a form in front of me, holding my hand down to press my fingers onto the paper. That was all I needed to hear. By 8:20, I was already pulling into the parking lot of the bank. Linda, the branch manager and an old friend of Robert's, met me with a warm but hesitant smile. Irene, what's going on? I didn't waste a second. I need transaction records for the past 90 days. All joint accounts. Any business payments made in my name. Also, I want to report unauthorized access during a medical recovery period. Her face tightened. She led me to her office and printed everything. I watched line by line as the same label kept appearing across transfers. LJW Holdings. Amounts ranging from $3,000 to $45,000. Each labeled repair, investment, or renovation. Linda turned to me. Were you authorizing these? No. And I want everything flagged. We filed a fraud report together. Linda noted it as suspected elder financial abuse. She also printed out a breakdown of the most suspicious entries. On the way out, I stopped by the maintenance company Derek claimed to have hired for the roof. A small red sign above the door read, Big Pine Roofing. I pushed the door open. A bell jingled overhead. The man at the front desk had a sunburned face and greyish stubble. I asked if they had done any work on 426 Avalon Lane. He scratched his neck. Not for years. Not since we patched that leak in the back bathroom. I remember it because the lady didn't want tile replaced, said it gave the house character. That was me. No records of recent payments or contracts, nothing tied to my name, nothing tied to LJW Holdings either. I thanked him and stepped outside, heart racing. By noon, I had a file folder full of holes in their story. That night, I didn't sleep much. I laid in bed with the lights off, listening again. Not for sounds, for the silence before the storm I was about to start. The following morning, Derek showed up at the house. Without warning, without shame. He strolled in like nothing had happened, like the house still belonged to him the way he believed it always should. I was pouring coffee when he spoke behind me. We need to talk about consolidating some accounts. Lana and I are thinking of adding a guest pool out back. It'll raise the property value by a good 10%. I turned slowly. My hands didn't shake this time. I poured him a cup without looking up. Funny. I thought you said this house was yours now. He shrugged, taking the cup like it was his right. It is. But you're still here. Might as well use your presence to keep it up. Neighborhood likes the idea of a retired widow in the window, makes everything look safe and settled. I froze. Not at the insult, but at the clarity of it. He wasn't even trying to hide what I had become in his mind. A prop, an ornament to sell a better illusion. I pulled out the folder, laid it on the table between us. He didn't touch it. What's this proof? That you and Lana committed fraud, that you transferred funds out of my account, not yours, that you used my recovery period to stage a fingerprint transfer, that your company, LJW Holdings, is a shell. His face shifted. Not fear, not regret. Annoyance, Mum. You don't understand how these things work. This is how families build wealth. We consolidate. We grow. You're just holding things back because you don't want to let go. Let go. Let go of the house I nursed your father in. Let go of the savings I skipped meals to build. Let go of a name I spent 50 years keeping clean. I stood up. You want wealth, Derek. Fine. But not at the cost of my dignity, not at the cost of my sanity, and not at the cost of the truth. I opened the folder wider, pointing to the highlighted sections. These are flagged transactions. This one here was during my eye surgery. I have a nurse's statement confirming I was medicated, visually impaired, and unaware of the forms you had Lana place in front of me. He raised his voice. You always do this. You always act like you're the victim. You chose Claire over me for years. You were never really a mother to me. You don't get to cry foul just because you're feeling guilty now. There it was. The wound. Wide open. I held my ground. I failed you, Derek. I admit that. I was overwhelmed. I was broken. And I couldn't be in two places at once. But that does not give you the right to steal from me. That does not give your wife the right to forge legal documents. That does not give anyone the right to erase me. He stood too, fists clenched, but not raised. You're going to regret this. I already do. I walked around the table and opened the front door. He hesitated. I said nothing. He walked out without finishing the coffee. As the door clicked shut behind him, I exhaled fully for the first time in weeks. I wasn't scared of Derek anymore. I wasn't scared of what he might do, because I had already decided what I was going to do next, and it was going to be loud, public, and impossible to undo. I didn't give Derek a day to catch his breath. The moment the door shut behind him, I locked it, walked straight to the kitchen, and pulled out every document I had been collecting. I laid them across the dining table like evidence at trial. The video statement from the nurse was coming. The flagged transactions were printed and circled. The roofing company had confirmed no recent work. And the LLC under Lana's name, LJW Holdings, was officially registered 2 weeks before the first major withdrawal from my joint account. That wasn't coincidence. That was strategy. That was theft, dressed in legal clothing. By mid-morning, I was sitting at the front desk of Clearwater Senior Legal Aid, folder in hand, ready to go to war. A young woman named Clarissa greeted me. She had soft eyes, a firm voice, and a sharper spine than most people twice her age. She reviewed my folder, line by line, and didn't blink once. "You're saying you were medicated and visually impaired when your fingerprint was used on this financial transfer?" "Yes." The nurse confirmed it. "She's preparing a written statement. The bank has flagged all recent transfers. The roofing company confirmed no recent work. The LLC is a shell under my daughter-in-law's name." Clarissa leaned forward. "You understand what you're accusing them of? Elder financial abuse, fraud, medical manipulation." I nodded. "I understand perfectly." "Then let's move. We need a formal complaint submitted. We'll request the clinic's footage immediately. Once the nurse's written statement is filed, we'll submit that with the rest. Do not contact them again for now. Let us take the lead." I agreed. But I had my own plan too. I wasn't finished, not even close. By that evening, I sat at my kitchen table, dialing the number for the Clearwater Neighborhood Council. I told them I wanted to attend the next open meeting and speak about elder abuse. Not in theory, in reality, in my neighborhood, in my house. They put me on the list. I didn't sleep much that night. I stayed up reviewing the papers again, reading every detail, memorizing every line item. Then I wrote out my speech, short, sharp, unapologetic. The meeting was scheduled for the following evening. I showed up 10 minutes early, folder in hand, heels clicking on the tile floor of the community center. The room was already filling up. Folding chairs lined the room in tight rows. Old neighbors, new couples, people I'd known for decades. People who waved from across lawns but never asked what kept my eyes hollow lately. I sat quietly in the second row. Clarissa arrived 5 minutes before the meeting started. She didn't smile, just gave me a small nod and sat beside me. The meeting began with local zoning updates, a new grocery store plan, a crosswalk proposal. Then, finally, the moderator stood at the mic and cleared his throat. "We have a resident speaker tonight, Mrs. Irene Whitlow, who would like to address the group on an important personal matter." "Mrs. Whitlow, the floor is yours." I stood, walked slowly to the front. My pulse thudded in my ears, but my voice was clear. "Good evening. My name is Irene Whitlow. Many of you know me. You've seen me on my porch. You've borrowed sugar from me. You've watched my house glow orange at sunset and assumed peace lived there. It didn't." I paused. 2 months ago, during a medical procedure, while sedated and recovering, I was manipulated into signing over my home, my finances, and my autonomy to my own son and his wife. Gasps echoed, chairs shifted. They registered a company in her name. They funneled money through it under the guise of home repairs. Repairs that never happened. They used my joint accounts. They called it help. But what they really did was erase me while I still stood in my kitchen, washed their plates, folded their towels, and paid the utilities. Whispers rose in the room. I held up my hand. This isn't about sympathy. This is about awareness. It's about how easily someone you raised, someone you held through fevers and scraped knees, can turn around and strip you bare while smiling in your face. I held up a copy of the flagged transactions. This is the paper trail. And I have more: a nurse's testimony, a fraud report, an active investigation. I'm not here to ask for help. I'm here to warn you. Because if it can happen to me, it can happen to any of us. The room was silent. I thanked them, then returned to my seat. Clarissa leaned in. That was powerful. They heard you. Not enough. Not yet. The moderator cleared his throat again. Thank you, Mrs. Whitlow. We encourage others to speak with her after the meeting if they wish to support her effort. That support came faster than I expected. After the session, several neighbours approached. One offered to write a statement about the lack of visible repairs. Another mentioned seeing Lana leave with stacks of envelopes during their last visit. A third asked if I'd consider speaking to a local news contact. I considered it. Then I said yes. By the time I got home that night, my voicemail already had 2 messages. One from the local ABC affiliate, another from a woman named Patricia, who ran a senior justice organization. But what hit hardest was the third call. The nurse. Her voice was steady. Irene, I just submitted my statement to the legal office, and I'm going on record. I remember your daughter-in-law placing your hand on the document. You were groggy. You asked her what it was. She told you it was just a clinic receipt. I remember it clearly. I whispered a thank you and ended the call. I stood in the dark kitchen for a long moment. This was no longer a private matter. This wasn't about shame. This was about power. And for the first time in a long time, I could feel it shifting back into my hands. Tomorrow, I would begin the next phase. No more hiding, no more hoping they'd undo the damage. Tomorrow, the reckoning would be public. On my terms. In broad daylight. With their names attached. They wanted to treat me like a silent, forgettable old woman. They were about to meet the version of me who remembered everything. And forgave nothing. By sunrise, I already had my outfit pressed, documents stacked, and the phone numbers of every local reporter who had left me a voicemail. I hadn't slept. I didn't need to. My name had been taken from the deed, but I was about to carve it into every conversation in town. At 8:30 sharp, I walked into the Clearwater Gazette building and handed my file to the woman behind the front desk. She blinked twice at the thickness of the folder, then ushered me toward a glass office with a young man hunched over a keyboard. He stood up the moment he saw the label: Elder Abuse and Financial Fraud. Within minutes, he was recording my statement, snapping copies of the documents, the flagged transactions, and the nurse's written account. I didn't flinch. I didn't soften the details. I spoke like someone who had held in too much for too long and finally learned how to weaponize the truth. By noon, the local ABC station had me sitting in a studio chair, microphone pinned to my collar. Lights overhead. A camera 2 feet from my face, a producer counting down with her fingers. And I spoke. I said everything. I named Derek. I named Lana. I said my own son used my recovery from surgery to obtain my fingerprint for a fraudulent transfer of home and financial control. I said my daughter-in-law built a fake company to drain every cent out of our shared account. I said they smiled in my face while tearing my life apart behind my back. The segment aired by evening. I watched it from the living room of my neighbor, Doris. The room fell quiet after it ended. She looked at me and reached for my hand. I didn't squeeze hers. I wasn't in the mood for comfort. I was in the mood for fire. By morning, the town was split into 2 camps, half in shock, the other half pretending to be. Texts rolled in, calls, even a few unexpected knocks on the door. Some offered to testify. Others just stared at me with a new kind of respect. Then came the one voice I had been waiting to hear. Lana. She didn't bother texting. She showed up on my front porch at 7:42 p.m. a tight grey dress on her frame, heels clicking as if stomping would make her words more convincing. I opened the door but didn't move aside. Her jaw was tense. "You need to stop this, now." I didn't move. "You embarrassed your own son on public television. Do you realize how damaging that is?" I tilted my head. "As damaging as stealing from your husband's mother while she was medicated and recovering from surgery." She tried to step forward. I blocked her. "You're making this worse for yourself, Irene. I'm trying to fix it." "No, you're trying to cover it. Big difference." She leaned in, voice sharp. "If you keep this up, there will be consequences." I smiled. "You already had your consequence. It aired last night at 6. Lana's eyes narrowed. She stepped back, pulling her phone from her purse. "Then I guess we'll escalate this legally." "Good. I already started. But I'm not done yet." She froze. "What do you mean?" I stepped outside, shut the door behind me, and faced her on the porch. "You see, I've already met with 2 law firms. One of them is preparing to file charges for elder financial abuse. Another is working with the Senior Justice Task Force to make sure this case becomes precedent for the state. There's going to be a name attached to the bill they're drafting for stricter power of attorney protections. That name is mine." Lana's lips parted, but nothing came out. I kept going. "Every local paper is running my story tomorrow. The Sunday segment is being picked up statewide. And the Nursing Association has launched an internal investigation based on the video from your little fingerprint stunt. So yes, Lana, let's escalate." Her voice shook now. "You're destroying your family. You destroyed it when you treated me like a piece of property, when you turned Derek's resentment into a scheme, when you used my grief and guilt as leverage." I took a step closer. "You may have built a fake company, but I'm building something real, something public, something permanent." She swallowed. "You don't know what Derek is capable of when he's cornered. Neither do you." I walked past her and back into the house. I didn't slam the door. I didn't lock it in a hurry. I simply turned off the porch light behind her. The next day, I was at the bank again. Linda greeted me with an urgency I hadn't seen before. "We just received word. Derek tried to open a new joint account using a copy of your expired ID. But since you flagged your profile for fraud, it triggered an alert." "Perfect. We forwarded everything to the legal aid office and the police. Thank you." By late afternoon, the sheriff's office called. They wanted me to come in and provide a full statement. I did. I brought every file, every note, every recording I had. Clarissa sat beside me the entire time. When it was over, the detective looked me in the eye. "We're moving forward with charges." I nodded. Finally. But I wasn't finished. Later that evening, I received a phone call. Not from Derek, from his employer. Apparently, someone had forwarded the news clip. Human Resources had questions about his involvement in a financial crime. He had been placed on indefinite leave. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, stared at the empty chair across from me where Robert used to sit, and I smiled. Not because it was over, but because it had finally begun. My silence had cost me everything. My voice was now going to cost them more. The rain had stopped, but the clouds hung low like the town was holding its breath. I was already dressed when the knock came. 3 sharp raps on the front door. No hesitation. I opened it. Derek stood there, soaked from the chest down, jaw tight, eyes glassed over with something between fury and disbelief. Behind him, his car idled at the curb, door still open like he couldn't even be bothered to close it before storming in. He didn't wait for an invitation. He brushed past me, shoes dripping onto the hardwood, pacing like a caged animal. "You went on TV. You actually did it." I closed the door and turned to face him. "You forced my hand. He scoffed. This is what you call justice, no. This is what I call the beginning. He turned sharply, pointing a finger at me. You humiliated me. You ruined my job. You think you're the victim here. But you never saw what it was like being your son. You never saw what it did to me, growing up in the shadow of your perfect little Claire. My chest tightened. There it was again. Her name, always twisted into a weapon. I stepped forward. Don't you dare put this on her. Don't you dare take your resentment and dress it up like a justification. What you did had nothing to do with grief. It was greed. It was calculated. It was vile. He shook his head. You were never there. You stopped being my mother the day she got sick. The house turned into a hospital room. You turned into a ghost. I was left alone to figure out what a man was supposed to be, while you lit candles at her bedside. I stared at him. And that's why you stole from me. Because I failed you as a mother. His eyes flickered. I had struck the nerve. No. I did what I had to do to reclaim something. You were never going to give it. You didn't reclaim anything. You forged it. You waited until I was blindfolded in a hospital room. You used your wife's voice and your own silence to push my hand against paper I didn't understand. I opened the drawer of the side table and pulled out the file. Do you want to see the receipts again, Derek? Or should I recite them to you? I laid the papers across the coffee table. The LLC registration, the flagged bank withdrawals, the nurse's written statement, the confirmation from the roofing company, the report from the sheriff's department, my handwritten timeline, every page a bullet. He stared at the table. You think any of this proves something? It proves everything. You think people won't forget this in a month? They won't have the chance to. Because in 48 hours, the Sunday broadcast will air statewide. Your face, Lana's name, every detail, unedited. He looked like he wanted to punch a hole through the drywall, but he didn't. He stood there, fists clenched, mouth twitching. I kept going. You lost your job, you lost the house. You're about to lose a lot more. Because I've already started the process of freezing every remaining account that was touched during the months of your scheme. He took a step closer. You're trying to destroy me. No, I'm showing you how fast someone collapses when they build everything on a lie. He dropped into the armchair across from me. For a second, I saw something in his face I hadn't seen since he was a child. Shame. Real and raw. You think Lana planned all of this? I didn't answer. He looked down. She told me it was just a way to protect the family money, that we'd fix the house, invest in something small, and it would grow, that you'd be better off with less to manage. She told you I was better off erased. He didn't reply. The silence between us was no longer quiet. It rang loud. I walked to the window and stared out at the damp street. Then I turned back. You know what the hardest part was? He lifted his head. It wasn't the money. It wasn't the papers. It wasn't even the lies. It was realizing that my son could look me in the face and see nothing worth protecting. His mouth opened, then shut again. You had every chance to speak to me, every chance to ask for help, every chance to say you were angry or hurt or confused. Instead, you chose to steal. And worse, you chose to silence me while doing it. I picked up the letter from Claire's scrapbook, the one he never opened. I held it out. She saw you, even when I didn't. She asked you not to hate me, but you did it anyway. He took the letter. His hands trembled. I didn't know what to do after she died. I just wanted something to make sense. Lana made it sound so easy. I nodded. She gave you a map for revenge, and you followed it. He stood, folded the letter, and placed it back on the table. "What happens now?" I stared at him. "Now, you watch the world look at you the way you looked at me. Dismissed, undervalued, disposable." He winced. "But you also get a choice. You can continue down that path, or you can crawl your way out. Not for me, for yourself." He hesitated. "What if I want to make it right?" "Then you start by returning every cent. You testify. You sign the statement. You look at the camera and admit what you did." He swallowed. "I'll try." I walked past him, opened the door and gestured toward it. "Try somewhere else." He stepped out, slower this time. The door closed behind him. And I stood there, surrounded by the sound of my own breathing. It wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned. The storm I started was no longer mine to carry. It was his to survive. The town council meeting was packed. More chairs had to be dragged in from the back hallway. Every seat was filled. People stood along the walls, whispering, shifting, looking toward the front where a podium and mic stood waiting. Word had spread fast. The Sunday broadcast had gone statewide that morning. My name, my voice, and my accusations had reached every corner of the state. But it wasn't over, not even close. I had requested a special session with the council, not for sympathy, not for applause. I wanted a stage. I wanted faces. I wanted every person who once waved at me from their porch or passed me in the market to hear the truth directly, not just through headlines. I waited in the side hallway while the chairwoman read the agenda. My folder was tucked under my arm, but I no longer needed it. I could recite every transaction, every date, every betrayal without looking down once. When my name was called, I stepped into the room. People turned in their seats, some nodded, some looked away. A few pulled out their phones, already filming. I walked to the mic. No shaking hands this time. I spoke without reading. For months, my son and his wife stole from me. They used my illness as a weapon. They took my home, my savings, and my silence. But I'm not silent anymore. I paused, scanning the crowd. The truth is, most elder abuse doesn't come from strangers. It comes from the people we once held in our arms. It comes wrapped in soft voices and family titles. And it always starts the same way, with silence. My voice cut through the still air. "That ends today." I stepped aside. The council chair leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitlow, do you have evidence to support your claims?" I turned to the door. Linda from the bank walked in first. She held up her folder. "I can verify that over $70,000 was removed from Mrs. Whitlow's accounts under suspicious labels. None of those withdrawals align with service invoices." She stepped aside. Next was Emily, the nurse. "I was present during Mrs. Whitlow's eye surgery. She was under heavy sedation. Her daughter-in-law placed her hand on a document and told her it was a receipt. It was not." Murmurs rose in the room. I watched faces shift. Some looked down. Some looked furious. Then came Mr. Carson, the roofer. "My company never worked on her home recently. We didn't receive payment. We didn't send crews. That money went somewhere else." Each of them stood like pillars behind me, not just words. Witnesses. Finally, Clarissa stepped up. "The Senior Legal Aid Office has filed an official report with the county. We have entered all evidence into the state database for prosecution of elder financial abuse. This case meets all qualifying criteria." The chairwoman cleared her throat. "Thank you. Mrs. Whitlow, we will begin the formal investigation procedures as of today." I nodded. I turned back to the audience. But I wasn't finished. From the front row, Lana stood. She wore all black, designer jacket, flawless makeup. Her heels echoed on the hardwood as she walked toward the mic. I did what I had to do. She was forgetful. She needed help managing things. The crowd stiffened. I didn't take anything she didn't owe me. Gasps echoed. I stepped forward, facing her. What exactly did I owe you? She smiled, sharp and rehearsed. Time, energy, years. I've cleaned that house. I've managed her prescriptions. I've driven her to appointments. Do you know how exhausting it is to care for someone who doesn't even say thank you? I didn't blink. So you decided to help yourself to $70,000 and my home? She didn't answer. I kept going. You created a fake company. You funneled money out of a shared account. You forged legal documents while I was sedated. You used my son's pain to build your little empire. She stepped closer. He wanted to fix things. You broke him. No. You fed him poison and told him it was justice. The room was silent. I turned to the council. Do you need anything else? The chairwoman shook her head. This session is closed for public comment. We will review the formal complaint and notify all parties within 72 hours. As I stepped down from the platform, Derek entered the room. All heads turned. He looked like a ghost, hollow-eyed, wrinkled shirt, hands clenched. Lana froze when she saw him. He didn't sit. He walked slowly to the front of the room and stood beside me. I want to speak. The council hesitated, then allowed it. He looked at Lana first. You told me she wouldn't remember. You told me we were helping her. She stepped back. We were. He shook his head. No. You used me. You took everything I was afraid of and turned it into your excuse. He turned to the crowd. I forged my mother's name. I signed documents behind her back. I opened a company in my wife's name. I drained the account. I lied. I let her take the fall because I was too ashamed to admit I wanted more. You can arrest me. You can fire me. You can throw me out of the family. But I won't let her carry this anymore. He faced me. I'm sorry. He turned and walked out. Lana followed, heels clicking faster now. The room was still. The councilwoman turned to me one last time. Do you have anything to add? I looked at the crowd, their faces, their silence. Yes. I want every one of you to remember this night, not because I exposed my family, but because I refused to be erased. I walked out the front door without looking back. The sky had cleared. The storm wasn't over. But I was the one holding the lightning now. The morning after the council meeting, the clip of Derek's confession had already gone viral. Every local news outlet replayed it. Headlines called him the son who stole from his mother and then confessed in front of the entire town. Comment sections filled with outrage, sympathy, and disbelief. But I didn't care about any of that. What mattered was momentum, and I was not about to let it slow down. By noon, I was back at the Clearwater Bank, sitting in a glass-walled office across from Linda. Her expression was tight, alert, no longer the soft look of a friend helping a friend. She had become a professional in the middle of a legal minefield. I reviewed the flagged transaction reports again, this time going line by line with her assistant. Every withdrawal, every dollar traced from my account into LJW Holdings, every payment categorized under renovation, repair, property improvement. All fake, all leading back to Lana. She tapped a few keys and pulled up one more transaction. This one's new, transferred 2 days ago, $4,750. It didn't go into LJW. It went to a personal checking account under Lana Whitlow. I leaned in. Was it pulled from the joint account number from your health reimbursement fund? My spine stiffened. That fund had been set up for emergencies, medical needs. It required dual access. My thumbprint or in-person approval. Linda clicked once more, then looked at me. She did it using a thumbprint scanner, remote login. Your credentials had already been flagged, but the system processed it because the scanner bypassed the ID delay, so she still had a copy of my fingerprint, and she was still using it. Call the fraud department, flag that account, freeze it immediately. Linda nodded. It's done. I stood. My body buzzed, not with nerves, with anger. Outside the bank, the air was thick. My car was already running. I slid into the driver's seat and pulled out my phone. There was only one place left to go today. I drove straight to the office of a private investigator. His name was Robert Castillo. He was retired law enforcement, now specializing in white-collar crimes and domestic fraud. I had been referred to him by Patricia, the director of the senior justice group I spoke with last week. Castillo didn't ask small-talk questions. He saw the folder, flipped through it silently, and leaned back in his chair. This is enough for civil litigation. But if you want this airtight, we track the devices. We follow the bank activity, not just on paper, but with real-time logins, access points, location stamps. She's gotten bold. That means she's gotten sloppy. How soon can you start? I already did. He pulled up a laptop, turned the screen toward me. This IP address here matches a device used in your house 3 weeks ago. It logged into your health fund and opened a fingerprint scan. That file was saved, then exported to a secondary device. Guess where it pinged next? He tapped the screen. Lana's yoga studio, Midtown, same address listed on the LJW LLC filing. I stared at it. So she stored my biometric data and kept using it to move money. Castillo nodded. And she's still using it. I stood. What happens if we go public with this? He smiled. We will. After we give her a chance to bury herself first. The next morning, I held a press conference. Nothing grand. Just me, Clarissa, and 3 reporters outside the community center. I read a brief statement. Clarissa confirmed the formal charges were being filed. The reporter asked about the latest theft. Clarissa answered. We have reason to believe Mrs. Whitlow's fingerprint was digitally stored and used without her consent. Evidence shows a recent transfer was executed from her health fund, which had been previously restricted. This marks a new layer of premeditated fraud. That was the headline the next day. Premeditated. Lana didn't show her face for 72 hours, but when she did, she made sure it was dramatic. She stormed into the same bank branch. Cameras caught it. She walked in wearing sunglasses and a trench coat like some B-list courtroom actress. She demanded a meeting with management. Linda called me immediately after. She screamed. Called you manipulative. Accused the bank of violating her rights. What did you tell her that her rights ended when she used a sedated woman's fingerprint to drain her own emergency fund? Then I had security escort her out. I let that sit for a moment. Then I said, good. But it wasn't enough. I needed the town to see it for themselves. I called a town hall. Open invitation. Same room. Same microphone. The crowd was even bigger than before. Reporters, neighbors, former co-workers, strangers who had been following the story online, and front row, 2 empty seats. One had Derek's name on it. The other had Lana's. Derek showed. Lana didn't. I walked to the front. I'm not here to tell the story again. You've heard it. You've seen the footage. You've read the headlines. But I will tell you this. Every time someone steals from the elderly, they count on one thing. That we'll be too ashamed to speak. That we'll protect our families by sacrificing ourselves. That silence is safer than exposure. She counted on that. And she was wrong. I held up the printout from Castillo. This is a login report. It shows my fingerprint was copied, stored, and used after I revoked access. That's not just theft. That's identity abuse. That's biometric fraud. That's a crime. I turned to Derek, who sat stiff in his seat, eyes forward. Your apology matters, but accountability is louder. He stood slowly. I'm cooperating with the investigation. I've signed over the LLC. I've transferred every remaining dollar back. I've testified in full. He looked around the room. My name will never recover, but hers shouldn't either. I stepped down. The crowd erupted in quiet applause, not the kind for celebration, the kind for reckoning. That night, Lana's name trended for all the wrong reasons. By morning, her studio lease had been cancelled, and for the first time in months, I slept with the windows open. Not because I felt safe, because I finally felt seen. I stood at the edge of the courtroom parking lot, staring up at the sharp glass edge of the building like it was the final wall between me and the truth I had carried for over 2 decades. My coat flapped behind me as the wind picked up, but I didn't flinch. Inside those walls, I was going to rip apart every last lie they built. By the time I stepped into the room, they were already there. Megan sat flanked by 2 attorneys in sharp suits who looked too young to understand the depth of what they were playing with. Beside them was Jeremy, still chewing gum like a smug teenager, his legs stretched out like he owned the damn bench. He looked up and grinned, the same grin he wore the night he left that baby and $100 bill on my porch. I walked straight to the front. My attorney, Angela, handed me a single sheet of paper. I didn't need it. I had the words burned into my spine. The judge entered. Everyone stood. Formalities flew by like dust. Then it began. Megan's lead attorney was the first to speak, launching into a tirade about maternal rights and emotional trauma, about how Megan had returned after 2 decades to reclaim her daughter, whom she had only abandoned out of postpartum stress. He used words like empathy, mental health, rehabilitation. My stomach turned. They painted Megan as a wounded woman, a phoenix, a mother who had to disappear to heal. The courtroom was silent as he painted that fantasy. Even the judge leaned back, absorbing it all. Megan bowed her head dramatically, squeezing out a tear at just the right moment. Jeremy handed her a tissue like a rehearsed stage cue. Then it was my turn. Angela stood, steady and clear, her voice slicing through the fabricated fog. She reminded the court that no mother files to reclaim custody 21 years later, just weeks after a $71 million inheritance was legally transferred. She reminded them that the day Megan returned, she did not visit her daughter, she visited a real estate lawyer. She showed screenshots of Megan calling my granddaughter the golden goose in private emails. Gasps rose. And then it came. The witness had kept hidden. Angela turned to the side door and signaled. A woman in her late 40s walked in, sharp suit, steady eyes. Her name was Diana Lopez. She was a former paralegal for a lawyer Megan hired years ago in Arizona. She testified that Megan had planned the comeback since the inheritance rumors leaked. Emails, calls, voice recordings, all documented, all signed. The courtroom cracked open like a dropped glass. Megan stood up and shouted, called Diana a liar, said she never met her. Then Diana pulled out a printed flight itinerary from 2021, paid by Megan's personal card. Destination, Phoenix to Tucson. Hotel, 1-night stay. Purpose, legal consultation. Under the note column, it said 2 words in Megan's own handwriting. Custody strategy. Jeremy looked like he'd been slapped. But I wasn't done. I stood up myself, requested to address the court as guardian and grandmother. The judge allowed it. My voice didn't shake once. I told them about the night Megan left, about the $100 bill, about the silence. I told them about the hospital visits, the fever when the baby was 5 weeks old, the sleepless nights, the teenage heartbreaks, the college move-in day. I told them about the time my granddaughter asked why she didn't have a mum, and how I told her not to hate someone who disappeared. I showed the court the trust fund statements, the new scholarship she had created in her late father's name, the volunteer work she did for abandoned kids. The girl Megan called the Golden Goose had grown into a woman worth 1,000 times more than any check. I turned to Megan and said it loud enough for every journalist in that room. You don't get to walk back into someone's life because you smelled money. You don't get to rewrite the past because your wallet is empty. She stared at me like she didn't know who I was. Then the judge dropped the hammer. Petition for parental rights denied. Megan was banned from contacting my granddaughter directly for 5 years, and a separate investigation would be opened regarding attempted fraud. Jeremy stood up and left. Didn't say a word. Not to Megan, not to the judge, not to me. Megan collapsed into her chair like someone had unplugged her bones. But it wasn't over. Angela stepped forward again and informed the court of a separate civil suit we were filing. Defamation, harassment, emotional damages. Not for money, but for the record, for the truth, for the scars Megan left on the child I raised. I walked out of that courtroom into the sunlight, the wind brushing through my hair. My knees ached, my back was stiff. But I walked taller than I had in years. Outside, my granddaughter waited in the car, eyes wide, hands clenched on the steering wheel. I slid into the passenger seat, buckled in, and said one word: drive. She didn't ask how it went. She didn't need to. Because justice wasn't just something we won that day. It was something we reclaimed, piece by piece, with truth, with fire, with everything a woman like me had left. And it was far from over. 2 days after the courtroom verdict, I received an invitation that made the blood in my body pause for a full second. It was a formal dinner invitation, hand-delivered to my mailbox in a thick white envelope sealed with gold foil. The sender was Jeremy, not a text, not an email. A physical card like this was some twisted performance. Inside it read, "Dinner at 7 p.m., Flatirons Country Club, Private Room C. For old time's sake, I should have burned it. I should have tossed it into the fireplace and let it turn to ash beside the rest of the memories he stained. But something in me, something sharp and cold and precise, wanted to look him in the eye again. I wanted to see if the boy I once fed from my own kitchen would dare sit across from me and lie with that same shameless smirk. At exactly 6:59, I walked into the club wearing the same navy coat I wore to court. My granddaughter had begged me not to go, but I told her this wasn't about confrontation. It was about closure. The room was dim, too polished, too quiet. Jeremy sat alone at the far end of the long table, swirling a drink like he thought it made him look important. When he saw me, he stood and smiled with that nauseating calmness. I sat without returning it. He started light, as if we were family again. Compliments on my strength in court, regret over how things escalated, fake concern about my health, my finances, the stress of it all. I let him talk, let the performance roll on. Then he leaned forward and dropped his voice. "You know she's not going to stop." I said nothing. He continued. Megan had filed an appeal. They had new lawyers, big ones. Jeremy had contacts, friends who owed him favors. He offered me a way out. Sell the ranch quietly, sign over a portion of the inheritance. Let Megan step into a mentorship role in my granddaughter's life. We could call it healing, rebuilding. Family reunification. I looked at him, and for the first time, I let all the fury in my chest rise without filter. You call this healing? He blinked. You think offering me a bribe in a country club dining room while your girlfriend plots her next courtroom ambush is some kind of peace treaty? I stood, but I didn't leave. You and Megan abandoned that child like she was an inconvenience. You left her with no name, no future, no safety. I rebuilt her from scratch. I held her when she cried, taught her how to tie her shoes, filled in every blank you two left behind. And now that she's made something of herself, you crawl back with your manicured lies and your envelope dinners. His jaw tightened. You can sue, you can appeal, you can dig up every lawyer from every gutter between here and the coast. But you won't get 1 cent. You won't get her trust. You won't rewrite the past just because it makes your future look pathetic. He tried to speak. I raised a hand to silence him. You should have stayed gone. I turned, walked to the door, and then paused. One last thing. That little girl you threw away. She's giving a speech next week, her first public lecture. Full scholarship, keynote platform. And guess what the topic is Jeremy didn't answer? Abandonment and resilience. I left him there, mouth slightly open, whiskey untouched, the weight of my words cutting the air around him like glass. But the dinner wasn't the end. That night, a voicemail hit my phone. It was Megan. Her voice was cold, rehearsed. She said if I continued to poison her daughter against her, she would file a defamation suit and drag every personal detail of my past into public record. She said she knew about the foreclosure from 10 years ago, the therapy I went through after my husband died, the unpaid tax penalty I fought for 2 years. She said no court would protect a bitter, bankrupt old woman hiding skeletons. She made a mistake. The next morning, I walked into Angela's office and dropped the phone on her desk. "We're filing first," I said. "I'm done waiting for them to act so I can respond. This time, we burn first." Angela's eyes lit with a fire I hadn't seen since trial. She started pulling files, typing, calling contacts. Within an hour, we were coordinating with a journalist from a local paper, a woman who had been sniffing around Megan's backstory. I gave her everything: the abandonment, the trust fund, the sudden reappearance, the audio of the voicemail. Angela filed a motion for a restraining order based on harassment and credible threats. We filed a complaint with the Bar Association for Megan's legal team attempting intimidation. Then we sent a letter to the university Megan had falsely claimed she was lecturing at. Turns out, the invitation she boasted about was forged. One by one, we cut the legs from beneath their operation. By Friday afternoon, Megan's name was trending online for all the wrong reasons: hashtags about maternal fraud, comment sections boiling over with outrage. And my granddaughter, the girl they once left in a blanket and walked away from, was now receiving messages from people calling her brave, calling her the face of survival. I watched her read those messages from across the kitchen table. Her lips trembled, but held steady. She looked up and whispered, "They can't touch me anymore." She was right. And Jeremy, that smug silence at dinner, it didn't last. He showed up at my gate the next night, drunk, screaming into the dark like a man unraveling. He shouted that I had ruined them, that I had stolen everything. I stood behind the curtain and watched. No fear, no pity, just silence. The gate stayed closed. He left in a cloud of headlights and gravel. That was the moment I knew the war had turned. Because when people like them lose their lies, their money, and their illusion of control, all that's left is the mirror. And they can't stand what they see. The morning started quiet, too quiet for a day about to explode. By 9, Megan's face was all over the local news. Not a polished headshot, not the filtered photos she used to post online. No, This was courtroom footage, security camera stills, fragments of her walking out of hearings, flanked by lawyers with eyes cast down. Beside her face ran bold headlines about fraud, neglect, perjury under oath, and the forged university credentials we had uncovered just days before. I watched it unfold on TV in silence, holding my coffee without drinking a drop. Angela had warned me. Once the public saw her not as a grieving mother, but as a calculated manipulator, they'd devour the story. It was the kind of drama that stirred something primal. A child abandoned, a grandmother rising from the ashes, the rich woman who thought she could buy her way into a legacy. By noon, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Local papers, podcasts, 2 major networks. Everyone wanted interviews. They wanted the grandmother, the girl who had grown up without a name. They wanted pain packaged for public consumption. But I didn't take a single call. My granddaughter didn't need fame. She needed peace. Instead, I let Angela handle the statements. Calm, controlled, just the facts. Then the knock came. Hard, unapologetic. It was Jeremy. He looked nothing like the man who once sat smugly in a courtroom beside Megan. His suit was wrinkled, tie gone, eyes red. He pushed past the gate before I could speak and stood on my porch like he had a right to be there. "You think this is over?" His voice cracked like glass under pressure. "You think we're just going to disappear while you turn my life into a circus?" I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "My job put me on unpaid leave this morning. Megan's board seat was revoked. She can't show her face at the university anymore. My parents are getting calls. The firm froze our shared accounts. And your granddaughter just posted a smiling picture like none of this means anything." He was shaking now. I gave her my name. That was the moment I snapped. "You gave her your silence." My voice didn't rise. It dropped, heavy, cold. "You watched that child grow up from a distance and did nothing. You sent nothing. You signed nothing. You didn't ask about her health, her schooling, her birthday. You just waited until you thought she was valuable enough to claim Jeremy opened his mouth. And you know what's worse than abandoning a baby?" I kept going, pretending to come back for love when all you wanted was leverage. He froze. "You see, Megan thought this would be a clean hit. Walk into court, make some noise, scare the old lady into signing a check. But she forgot one thing. I don't scare. And I don't break. I bury." He staggered back, like the wind had punched him. The door opened behind me. It was my granddaughter. Jeremy turned, eyes wide. She didn't say a word, just stared at him. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe shame. Maybe he finally realized the girl he once refused to name would never look at him the same again. He left, without another word. The next blow came that evening. Megan filed a last-minute press release. A disaster wrapped in velvet. She denied all accusations. Blamed me for alienating her child. Claimed I had forged court papers to secure the ranch. That I manipulated an emotionally vulnerable girl for my own financial gain. She called me a bitter old woman clinging to land and legacy. I laughed for the first time in weeks. Because her desperation reeked. It was no longer strategy. It was survival. By the time Angela read the release aloud to the news anchor that night, we had already counted. Leaked court transcripts, legal affidavits, a voice memo where Megan joked about using motherhood as an investment strategy. Every move she made was documented, timed, and weaponized with precision. And then came the final blow. Angela stood in front of the courthouse the next morning and delivered the statement that would mark the end. "We have filed for full financial immunity and a permanent injunction. Any further attempts at contact, interference, or slander will be met with immediate legal consequence. This family has survived abandonment once. We will not be dragged through it again. That clip went viral. Commenters swarmed every corner of the internet. Some called Meghan a villain, some called her delusional. A few, predictably, played devil's advocate. But the overwhelming majority saw it for what it was: a reckoning. That night, Meghan's personal assistant quit and publicly shared screenshots of internal messages, plans to fake a reconciliation, drafts of social media posts written weeks in advance to spin the story, email threads between her and two blog owners who had offered to soften her image in exchange for sponsorship deals. It was over. She had been exposed, not by revenge, not by rage, but by truth laid bare. I walked into my granddaughter's room late that evening. She was staring out the window, the sky turning orange behind the hills. "It's done," I said. She didn't speak, just nodded. Then she whispered, "I never needed her love. I only needed to know I wasn't the reason she left." I sat beside her, held her hand. "You never were." And that was it. No fireworks, no applause. Just silence, thick with relief. But in that silence, there was power. Power in surviving, power in standing firm, power in finally being heard. Tomorrow we would start the process of sealing records, closing accounts, and drawing final lines. But tonight, we rested. The war had ended. Justice had spoken. And for the first time in years, I felt something I almost forgot: stillness. True, undisturbed peace. The storm had passed, but the wreckage still lingered. I spent the next few days cleaning more than just dust and clutter. It was about wiping off years of residue, emotional debris left behind by the silence, the betrayal, and the long wait for truth. The air smelled different now, lighter. The heaviness that had made its home in my chest began to lift, slowly, like fog burning off under morning sun. Angela came by with documents to finalize the injunction and settlement orders. It was the last round of signatures, the final nail sealing a door that never should have been opened again. Meghan and Jeremy would receive nothing. Not the land, not the name, not the child. The court made it permanent. It wasn't revenge. It was correction. A closing of a loop that had been twisted for too long. But paperwork didn't fix the ache. That was something else entirely. One evening, I walked into my granddaughter's room again. She was folding a letter, tucking it into an envelope, slow and careful. She looked at me and said it was for herself, for the girl she used to be, the one who used to wonder every night if she was forgettable, the one who used to think love had to be earned by being quiet, useful, or invisible. She said she wrote to that girl to tell her she was finally safe now. I didn't respond. I just sat down beside her. Sometimes, the deepest healing happens in silence. The town quieted too. People stopped whispering when I passed them in the market. Instead, some nodded. Others offered small smiles. A few strangers left flowers at the edge of the ranch gate. I never picked them up. Just let them sit there until the wind decided what to do with them. I didn't need validation, but it was nice to be seen. One morning, I walked out to the south field, the one we never used much because it sat too low, and the rain liked to drown it. But this time, I stood on the edge and saw something growing. Wild sunflowers. No one planted them. They just showed up. I took it as a sign. Maybe healing didn't always come from fixing what was broken. Maybe it came from planting something new beside it, letting it grow wild and different. By week's end, I gathered the legal folders, the pictures, the hospital records, and everything Meghan once tried to weaponize. I placed them all in a box and tied it shut. Then I walked it to the attic, not to hide it, but to shelve it, because I had lived through it, and I had survived it, but I would no longer wear it. That night, my granddaughter came to me and asked if we could start building the greenhouse again, the one we had talked about years ago before the courtrooms and media and betrayals. She said she wanted to grow basil and mint and strawberries, not for sale, just for us. I said yes. Not because I cared much about herbs, but because it was the first time she used the word gidwi, and it felt like a doorway was opening. The next few days were full of simple things: dirt under our nails, laughter over crooked shelves, music playing from the radio while we painted old boards. For the first time in years, the house didn't feel like it was bracing for impact. It just felt like home. The final hearing was brief, just a formality to confirm the restraining orders and asset decisions. Megan didn't show up. Neither did Jeremy. Their attorneys appeared alone, faces tight, words clipped. The judge signed off and looked me directly in the eye before dismissing the case. His expression held something I hadn't expected: respect. I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I had walked in. Not triumphant, not smug, just steady. Angela met me at the steps. She didn't say anything either, just nodded and handed me a small folded paper. Inside was a simple line: "You reminded the law that silence doesn't mean weakness." I kept that note in my coat pocket for weeks. I knew Megan would disappear into some other city, some other circle. She'd spin her own version of the story and maybe even believe it. But I no longer needed to follow her footsteps. Let her live in the echo chamber of her choices. I had nothing left to prove. The girl she left behind had found a voice, and I, the woman she underestimated, had found peace. That weekend, we finally invited people over again. Nothing fancy, just neighbors, a few ranch hands, and folks who had stood by us through it all. We grilled in the backyard, music played, someone brought pie. My granddaughter laughed so hard at one point she nearly dropped a plate. I hadn't seen that sound on her face in years. And just like that, life stitched itself back together. Not the same, but stronger. We weren't healed because the pain had vanished. We were healed because it no longer defined us. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. If this story touched something inside you, you're not alone. Many of us carry pain from people we once trusted most. Sometimes justice looks like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like rebuilding your peace brick by brick. If you've ever had to let go to protect your worth, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters here. And if you believe in healing, in dignity, in rising quietly but firmly, then hit that like button and subscribe. There's more truth to tell.